Hey, Mikki.
Hey Michelle, how you doing?
Good. Okay, so I have a story for you. We're just going to kick it right off. I have a
Sounds
story
good.
for you about an encounter that I had this past week. And I thought, oh man, there's a podcast here. So, a little backstory on this. I coach masters on Tuesday, Thursday nights in Kailua, and we hire a couple of like young 16-year-old swimmers, right? Like from the swim team to be our lifeguards because we're mandated to have a lifeguard, which is a whole other story. But anyway, what's cute is that so these girls like they sit just on the side of the pool like while I'm standing there, and I give out the set. They're very curious about like what are the adults doing and like what are the sets, and they ask me lots of questions. And half the time, if the swimmers are off on a long set, like I just stand there and I talk to these lifeguards. A lot of them, like, I really like them because they remind me some of my daughter, right? They remind me some of myself when I was 16. They're hard workers. Like they want to
Hmm.
know, they're very curious, they're open. And so I will share a lot with them about, physiology and like why we do these things and like why sprints make us more tired than distance set and like pacing and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so they know this about me by now because it's a pretty common practice that we have that like I think some of them even I think they talk to each other about it,
Mm.
which is also really cute because like they'll tell me stories about like the other one told them this and because they're friends. Anyway, so the one asked me last week, she like a very specific question about how to overcome her race nerves, right? So like what she's trying to do is she's trying to make a cut for like I don't even know exactly what it was, but like it's a stay cut or something like, and it's a time that you have to make. So like she has to swim, like under 103 for the 100 fly or pick the I don't remember what. I think she might be a breaststroker. Anyway, she was like, I keep missing it. She goes, I miss it every time by like a tenth of a second, right? Where if the cutoff is like 103.4, she's going 103.5. And she's like, and every time I miss it. And she goes, I know you've helped people, get over that. Like, what's your advice for me? And so I was like, oh, that's a great question, right? And so then I asked her. So the first thing I went to, of course, like when you're that close and you're talking tenths of a second, right? Like the physical ability is likely there, but like the place where I went was like you're likely physically more tensed up than you
Hmm.
need to be in order to reach your physical potential in that swimming event in the pool. And so, I asked her, how much does it matter to you that you make that cut? And and this is a really fascinating part of the story. She's like, a lot. And the reason it matters so much is because her perception is that the coach pays way more attention to the swimmers that have made that cut than the swimmers who haven't made that cut. Like he puts you like in a different category, like that you're not working hard enough or you're not the type of
Hmm.
athlete that he's going to give more attention to. And these 16-year-old girls are just craving, right? Like the validation from like, I'm good enough. And this is what they're thinking is that like, if I make that cut, then I'm good enough. And then my coach will start paying more attention to me. And I'm trying so hard to do that. And so the pressure that they're putting on themselves to meet this time is like really a lot. And so I asked like what kind of visualization, like do you ever do any kind of visualization or anything like that? And she said, well, the only kind of visualization we do, like structured within the team, she goes, is that we'll have like a meeting in the beginning of the year and the coach will say, like, note down what your goal times are for your events, right? So you're going to list out your events, then you're going to list out your goal time, the time that you want to get. And then you need to break that up into the splits of like per 50, what you need to be hitting in order to reach that final time, right? So that's their like goal setting process is okay, I need to go under a minute for the 100 free, which means that like my first 50 has to be 28.5 and then I can come back and 29.8 or I can even hit a 30.2 and I'll still be under a minute or whatever, right? Like
Hmm.
that's their process. And I was like,
Wow.
okay. I'm like, let's go back. And so at that point is when I had this major aha that, and just for the listeners where we're going with this, though that is an example of an outcome goal, right? Her only goal is the finish time when her hand hits the timing mat or the timing pad. And I'm thinking what we know and what I really took for granted that like, okay, everybody knows this by now, right? Like
Hmm.
everybody knows how to do this. We don't worry about outcome goals. We worry about process goals. And when we get the process right, we let the outcome take care of itself. And largely it does, like when we do all the little things right. And so basically I like guided this swimmer to start thinking about what are all the things that go into you swimming your best race, right? And so we started with like mindset, and I've done some mindset work with another one of her friends, which is another young girl like on this team. And this other gal was telling me her best time in like the 200 breaststroke happened at this meet in Maui where it was just for fun. It was no big deal. She wasn't even really in that good a shape. She didn't put any pressure on herself. She just went, she dove off the blocks. She swam a great
Hmm.
race. She surprised the heck out of herself. Like, look how well I swam.
Hmm.
And I'm like, okay, like, so what was your mindset there? She's like, oh, I was just having fun. Right. And then you contrast that to like, now here's your meat that like quote unquote matters so much and all the pressure's on. And now you're fully trained and you're tapered and, you know, all of the energy around you is so big and you dive off the blocks and you tense up and you screw it up and you swim slower than you did when you were supposedly out of shape a couple months ago in Maui when you were just having fun. And I'm like, there's a lesson here to be learned. And so I was telling this young swimmer, think about the mindset of how when you're happy and relaxed, how much easier fast swimming can be, right? So, and that doesn't mean you're like ignoring the details and not taking care of things. It's just that like you believe in yourself, but you're also just having fun. And this whole thing is you get to do this instead of I have to do this, right? So we're removing the pressure. And then I was like, now let's think about the actual process of what it takes to swim your best 100 free. So this is like your reaction time off the blocks, right? Your streamline as you're diving into the water, your turnover, your head position, your alignment, how quick your turns are, you're in and off the wall. How often are you breathing? What does your finish look like? I mean, do you have a good long finish with a full stroke? Like if you concentrate on each of those parts of the process, I guarantee you will meet that state time. Like if you've been missing it by a tenth every time, like stop thinking about the time that you need to hit and think about getting a good start, a good turn, good alignment, strong finish. Don't breathe so much, right? And you're going to do it. And she was like, oh, and what was fascinating, Mikki, is that this is like the first time she's ever heard that or
Wow.
thought of it. And it's like, this is a really top level swimmer who's never been coached on like, what is the
That's sad.
process of
That's
this?
really
Yeah. And
sad.
I was like, wow, okay. And so, and it just made me think of like, you know, so while that example was very specific to the swimmer in the pool for that specific event, like this is something that we are teaching our athletes all the time for, you know, your long distance races. It's like, all right, so like what's the mindset that is best for you to be in so that you can get the most out of yourself? How do you need to be fueling yourself? What is your, you know, is your equipment all in order and like your speed suit is, you know, the zipper's not broken on it and your goggles aren't foggy and you can see the right tint there. You know, I mean, there's so many
Hmm.
little things that it's like take care of all those little things so that on race day you can just focus on your pacing, your fueling, your hydration, keeping yourself, you know, like calm and in the moment. You come across a problem, you fix it, you move on. And it's so largely the case that when we focus on each of those parts of the process, that the finish time just takes care of itself.
Hmm. Yeah.
And yeah, and I think I just thought that whole thing was so obvious that everybody knew that already. So like, why do we even need to talk about it? And I was wrong. I think people need to talk about this.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. Love the idea. It's so, and not to be judgmental, but that's sometimes the nature is like, that's so sad that her coach, who I assume is, probably a pretty top level. I don't, who knows, right? I don't know what level swim coach they are, but that's their whole goal setting. I'm trying to remember back to when I was in high school, and I don't remember doing goal setting, to be totally honest. I mean, that's not something that I really, yeah, I don't really remember. Yeah. So I'm trying to think of like, where did I learn? Where did we learn this? it's probably been gathered over time, right? From
Yeah,
different
I
experiences.
learned it from different coaches over
Yeah.
time. Like
Yeah.
in me being an adult athlete,
Right.
hiring
Adult. Yeah.
coaches who were like, when I would give my race report or like, here's my race reflection, and you can tell a lot. Like as a coach, if an athlete writes up a race reflection or even just like says it to you verbally, the things that they're saying are the things that they're focusing on. And I remember
Absolutely.
telling, it was so funny. I remember telling a coach one time after like a sprint race, it was like here, like I wrote up my race reflection on it. And I was like, all right, well, I came out of the water and, there was one gal that was like 30 seconds ahead of me. And, I was trying to catch her through, transition. And then, like in the beginning of the bike, another gal went by me and I was sure that I could stay with her. And so like, I really tried to do that. And then blah, 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 and so like the point being that like what the coach read was that every part of my race reflection about how I was doing was based off how someone else was doing.
Mm,
Right?
I
You
see.
know what I
Yeah.
mean? So like, was my swim good? Well, I came out second. So like, yeah, because I think that other gal was actually better than me. So therefore, like, it wasn't about like I felt good. I felt like I was on top of the water. I kept my turnover up. Like it was none of that. It was just where was I in
In
comparison to
comparison.
this other gal.
Interesting.
And then same thing on the bike. Like when the other gal went by me and I thought I should be able to stay with her and I couldn't, that meant I was doing bad, right? So I'm judging my
Mm,
performance based off her. And the coach wrote back to me and she was like, the way that she said it honestly like kind of ticked me off at the time, and looking back she was 100% right, but I was like in my own little bubble. And she was like, can you think about how your race went without taking other people into consideration, right? Like how
mm,
did you do? And I was like, no, I can't do that, because the only thing that mattered to me was like how
right.
I was doing in comparison to everyone else. Like that was like I couldn't bring my brain to like wrap around
Interesting. Yeah.
judging my own performance only off of what I did and not bringing other people into it. I was like, no, it's a race. It only matters how I do as compared to everybody
Yeah.
else. And we were like clashing on that concept. And looking back now, like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. She must have been like so annoyed with me. And this is a while ago, but still, like, I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I could do it
I
now.
think, yeah. I think from my own experience, I think I had a lot of that at the end of my high school career in track, right? And placement, and how was I doing in comparison to like, the other fast athletes out there, or how I ranked at state or whatever. I think when I entered the sport of triathlon, I was postdoc, and so my science career was pretty stressful. It's always stressful. It's still stressful. And so, and I think my coach at the time, we were so, I don't even know if we used process oriented, but it was like hone in on this heart rate, right? And this heart rate translates to different efforts depending on the conditions, depending on the heat, depending on your fueling, depending on your hydration, depending on your fatigue, all these dependable. So I learned pretty early to ignore, a lot of the, not ignore, but not get tied up and not get attached to how fast I was going, or how much power. I didn't have a power meter for many, many years. We've talked about that before. I know you didn't either. You just kind of raced off of effort and heart rate. But yeah, I have the ability to put blinders on. However, I definitely work with athletes that do not have that capability. And I've worked with, like, for many years. It's almost like beating my head against the wall with some of the athletes who cannot embrace that if you take care of nutrition and your mindset and how the form. I mean, we can even take this down to just training, right? The athletes that are obsessed with pace on the run. I mean, because it's primarily run, although I do get some like speed, right, on the bike. Like, I was so slow today. I'm like, well, it
I
was
know.
windy, or you were on the hill. Like, who the fuck cares? So, excuse my language.
Yeah.
Who the f cares? And taking themselves out of how do they feel in that run, right? Do they feel, is their form good? Do they ache? Are they hungry? Are they bonking? Are they enjoying the views, right? Are they enjoying the process? And a lot of times they're not, because they're like, oh, I've got to run this X pace, because if I don't run this pace, then I'm slow, or I'm not doing enough, or whatever. Yeah. It's still an issue. It's still an issue, right?
The way that you just framed that, like really a little light bulb just went off in my head too, is I'm thinking about, because I might be a good example here because I feel like I've been on both sides of that, like legitimately been on both sides. Because at this point, I'm very, very good at focusing on the process. In fact, I love the process so much, I don't even really care about the outcome. Whereas before, I was very concerned about the outcome and wasn't as aware of how of the way that the process played into that. And in my mind, if I only focused on the process, it meant I didn't care enough about the outcome. I definitely wasn't going to
Mm,
get the outcome I wanted if I was
right.
only focused on the process. And now that I like when I look back on it with, I don't know, we'll call it a level of maturity that I have now that I didn't have a decade ago. Yeah, I think it's largely tied to your self-image, right? Or
Hmm.
it was tied to like my
Mm,
self-image. So like if I put my self-image and I tie it to my results from that race, right? That like I have to win my age group in that race, or I have to like beat that girl in the race to prove that I'm good enough. I'm really just I'm good enough. And that doesn't mean good enough like at the sport. It means good enough as a human being.
yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like
Yeah.
my self-worth depends on and we can tie that back to that swimmer too that we were talking about earlier. If in her mind the state cut means that the coach pays attention to me, like
That's
right,
also,
like
yeah.
so I
Yeah.
know it's crazy, but
That's
like
hard.
I'm
Yeah.
sure it's real because she's not the only one I've heard that
Yeah.
from about this coach.
Coaches do that. Coaches play
Yeah,
favorites.
yeah,
We've seen it. I'm sure we both have
yeah.
had.
And I think that
Yeah.
he's doing it as a way of saying that like, well, yeah, I'm going to give my time and attention to the people that are like working hard and have the best results or whatever. But like in her mind, she's like, I'm working as hard as I can, probably too hard at times, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
trying too hard to the point where it's backfiring and not even beneficial for her. But like if you and I will just speak from experience here, like when it mattered to me because my self-worth was on the line, then the outcome was the only thing that mattered. And it was really hard then to even think about the process. And the major shift for me and like why it's so much easier at this point to focus on the process is because like I can confidently say that whether or not I swim fast or bike fast or run at all,
Hmm.
like I am a good and I'm, as my
You're,
worth as a human being is I'm valuable. Like I am enough as I am. Like I love myself now, not in an arrogant, braggy way, but just in a like
yeah.
I believe that like I help people, like I contribute positively to my community. Like I can feel that inside now, which makes my outcome results way less important. And what's interesting is that then focusing on the process at this point in my athletic journey, it's so much fun. It's interesting. I really enjoy it. I come at my training now with a sense of curiosity and the things that I'm looking for, even in a main set. So, say, like if I'm swimming and it's a main set, what I'm looking for is not just the times that I'm holding or descending to or whatever, but the feeling that goes along with that. Right. So
Hmm.
like when I'm happy with the feeling, like, oh, that felt good. That felt like I was on top of the water. That felt like my turnover was easy to maintain. Like, and so like one
Hmm.
thing, and this is just a simple example, when I'm fit enough in the water, I'm able to maintain a high enough cadence for long distances and where that differs when say like I'd taken 5 or 6 months off from swimming and I started back and it felt terrible, one thing I noticed was that I just didn't have the capacity to keep my arms turning over in a way that allowed me to carry speed because I just like wasn't fit enough to do it. So my turnover was too slow and therefore my times were going to be too slow. The whole thing was too arduous. And when I'm fit enough, like one of the ahas I'll have is like this turnover is pretty quick and I'm completely capable of holding it. And that to me is like, hey, that's really cool. And you know what? The result at the end, the time, it's faster.
Every time
But like, so
it
like, yeah, it's like
literally,
I'm not going after the fast
yeah.
time. I'm going after holding the turnover. And when I can hold the turnover, the fast time magically shows up.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be hard pressed to try to think of a time, an example, an athlete I've worked with that was able to achieve what they wanted to achieve by keeping the outcome oriented mindset. I almost, I can't think of anyone, but I mean, I have examples of where they refuse to embrace the process and their race results and their overall training is not what it could be. It's just so pervasive of a, this is the way, this is the path, right? To do the work, embrace the little things, the everyday things, and the seemingly, I'll say little, they're not, right? But it's the instantaneous moments in a race where you are choosing whether you fuel or not, right? Like, oh, I don't feel like drinking or I don't feel like eating. Well, you know what? Then you don't feel like finishing at your time goal. That's the reality, right? Like you can just throw that out the window, because when we're talking about races over 90 minutes, mostly, right? You need to fuel. It's not about, I mean, when you are fitter, you can probably get away with a little bit more because you're probably your metabolic substrate. It depends on the efforts and what kind of power output and paces you're running and heart rates you're executing these efforts at. But underline, like if you are fitter, you can make more mistakes probably in your fueling and get by. But the reality is like if you're not going to concentrate on your fueling, or your mindset. And I so often see, I've had many examples of athletes that, one, struggle with fueling and don't make it a priority, and then two, the mindset around why they then start to suffer, and most of the time it's suffering on the run, slowing down, not being able to run their paces. And then the negativity comes in and it's like, oh, I always walk. So I'm just going to walk. I'm just going to, whatever, because that's the athlete I am. And then it comes back. It's never about the fueling. It's about, well, I'm not fit enough. I didn't do enough running. I didn't do enough stairs. I didn't do
Hmm.
enough hard efforts. I didn't.
Hmm.
And it's like, you can do all that. And if you don't focus on the process of the racing, which is, a long course, 70.3, I mean, even Olympic racing, you might need to take in some calories depending on where you're at, most likely.
I mean, it's a 2.5 hour race for a lot of people. So like that is absolutely long enough to be
Absolutely.
feeling really well. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And a little bit of electrolyte drink is probably not going to get you by unless you're at below your crossover point and you're racing basically as upper zone two. And you know that you have very good fat adaptation, but a lot of people do not, even then. Yeah.
How many times did Lucho say to you, feeling correctly is a choice?
All the time, all the time. And I say it to my
He said
athletes.
that to me so many times that like I
It is.
couldn't not hear it. Like feeling
Yeah,
correctly is a choice. Feeling
it
correctly is a
is.
choice. Feeling correctly is a choice.
It
And it was
is.
like the amount of
Absolutely
times
is.
I heard that it was just like, and so now like that's the thing that comes to my mind still. I mean, we're talking, so I doubt Lucho listens to this, but Lucho, if you happen to be listening, I mean, oh my God, was that 14 years ago? 14 years ago, you said to me, feeling correctly is a choice. Enough times that even now I think of
Repeat
that
it.
whenever I
Yeah,
feel like I don't feel like feeling, because it is
it
really
is.
common. Of course you don't feel like feeling. You're working really hard, you're breathing hard, it is hot. You don't want to fuel. Fueling
Right.
correctly is a choice.
It
So
is.
find something that you can get down, right? Like you still have choices, right? You don't have to drink that Gatorade. You don't have to eat the bar. I mean, you can have something else, but feeling correctly is a choice. And it starts from before you even start,
Yeah,
right? It
absolutely.
starts in the morning.
With proper fueling and making that part of we'll get back to the process, but fueling is a huge part of the process. It's a controllable in long course racing. And if it goes bad, right, we problem solve, we accept the situation. Our GI tract, for whatever reason, revolted and said no more, or we don't want that, then we problem solve and we know that we have to continue to fuel. I have an athlete doing a big marathon this coming up this next weekend in South Africa. What is the name of it? I'm blanking.
Is it the
Big
Comrades
five.
one?
No, it's not Comrades. I
Oh,
think it's
okay.
called the
Yeah.
Big Five, but it's a pretty gnarly
Hmm.
marathon. It's more of an ultra. They've got pretty serious elevation, undulating surfaces, sand, rocky. It's not like a pavement marathon. And she's like, well, I don't really have like a firm nutrition strategy. I want to have it flexible. And I honestly, I said, as
Yeah.
long as you know that
Yeah.
if you decide you don't want that gel, you have to take in something else. Like it's not a choice of like not taking in the gel and I'm just going to wing it. Like, no, you get to the aid station and you have a banana and a cookie and whatever else, right? Like I'm not like super like you have to take this gel at this time, right? Or else, but you have to continue to fuel, because if you don't, then your odds of finishing, especially for something that's going to be this hard and this long, is going to precipitously drop. You just don't have, like, most people do not have that kind of metabolic, they don't have the metabolic efficiency. And I know she's going to be above zone two, so it doesn't even matter, right? Most of us have 90 minutes ish of glycogen stores, and that's assuming different efforts and different, substrate utilization. Um, Anyways, yes, it is a choice. It is a choice, absolutely. And, not to, again, just one more example, I had an athlete, well, I actually had two athletes race Western Mass 70.3 this last weekend. Both did fantastic. Both embraced fueling, right? That was the protocol. And I'll just give the one example, kind of a return to racing after about a year and a half. I had a pretty rough past year. She's eroded some of her base a bit, right? The year previously was just very hard and training had to take a back seat. And so she's not where she would normally be to toe the line at a 70.3. And she knows that. I know that. It's not like we're going to wish this into a different situation or a different fitness, right? We have to accept where she's at right now. And she embraced, though, that fueling is going to get her across fueling and 20 years of racing is going to allow her to get across the line feeling good. And she negative split the half marathon by about 45 seconds per, from the front half to the back half. And she was top, well in the top 20. And so that's only because fueling and 20 years of wisdom of knowing how to delve out appropriate race efforts, even though she didn't finish quite where she normally would if she had towed the line with her normal amount of fitness. But she also, her mindset was such that she sort of said, I didn't care, but I think it was more like, I'm along for the ride. She was with a big group of friends and there was just no stress on the race, right? Like that acceptance of like, she knew where she was. She knew she had a fueling plan. She had a mindset plan. She was going to enjoy the day and she did fantastic. And my other athlete did fantastic too. She also had a little bit of some GI stuff prior to the race. And I think her fueling plan allowed her to get across the line, even though she wasn't feeling 100% at all during the entire day. Whereas other athletes would have, oh, my stomach's kind of upset and oh, poor me. And I'll just see how fueling goes. And epic blow up. I mean, that's like not even a question. Like that would have been an epic blow up. She wasn't a problem solver and she didn't embrace that, like, you have to fuel and figuring out what that looks like if your stomach's not quite right. Her plan worked pretty well up until, back half of the run. And she also felt pretty strong. So yeah, yeah. I'll stop
It's funny.
blabbering
That
about
reminds me
fueling,
of,
but
well, no, that reminds me of the day before Honu a couple weeks ago, where I was over on the Big Island supporting the athletes that I had racing there, and one of them who it was her first, like, and I gave them the ones who it's their first 70.3. I write it all out I used to have them write it out, and I'm like,
mhm,
you know what? I'm just going to write it out for you. If it's your
yeah,
first one, if you've done this for a long time, I don't write it out for you and tell you all the things you need to do. But if it's your first one, I'm like, here's the process, right? Starting from like, and here's your list, right? Here's your
right, right.
packing list. Here's your like all the things. And so I was very specific in like writing out like what you're, and I don't care what you eat. I don't care, but like count the grams of carbohydrates and here's how many grams of carbohydrates like you need for the bike. And so the day before the race, we were just texting and I just was checking in. How are you doing? How are you feeling? Do you have your fueling plan sorted? And she wrote back and said, well, I'm just going to use the aid stations for the fueling on the bike. And I wrote back, absolutely not. Right now, go.
Yeah.
Like, immediately drop everything you're doing and get yourself to like a bike somewhere, the expo, a bike shop, wherever. Buy yourself some gels or fluids for
Booze or
you
whatever. Yeah.
cannot depend on like that is for emergency purposes only, like the aid stations for fluid, fine, but like you're not going to depend on the gels and the bars and bananas and whatever from like the aid stations on the bike. Like that is only in the case that you dropped the own stuff that you brought in. I said, if you want it on the run, that's fine, right? Like use the aid stations for the run, no problem. But on the bike, you absolutely have to have your own just run. Because I was like,
Absolutely not.
stop
Yeah.
what you're doing right now, immediately.
Yeah.
Go buy yourself this fuel.
Yeah.
Because I also knew it was her first one. She hadn't done all the training she wanted to do. And there was just a lot going on in her life, as always comes up. She's moving, she's getting married, all the things.
Right.
And she didn't get in half her training in the last like 5 weeks. So I was like, you do not have the fitness to fake this. Like you have to dot all your I's,
Hmm.
across all of your T's. And so with that, like, what if we went in and we just really started talking about like, okay, so let's pick a 70.3. I feel like that's a pretty good event, right? So like, if we're saying process goals for a 70.3 race, right? And we just like, let's just go from the beginning. Like the process of that would be like, okay, let's think about what state do you need to be in mentally and physically, like on the start line. It's like, well, you want to be well rested, you want to be well hydrated, you want full stores of glycogen, you want to be, you know, like relaxed and happy, you want to be
Hmm.
injury free. And so all
Hmm.
those things are going to be like your process is going to be in the weeks before, or maybe the day, you know, the couple of days before, the weeks before, right? Where you're setting yourself up for the process of achieving that state, happy, healthy, excited to race,
Yep.
right? At the
Yep.
start line, and then all the things that go into that. And then you're like, okay, then for the swim, it's like, I have my swim skin or my wetsuit is in good shape. And I know that the zippers work. My goggles are correct. Like I'm comfortable with the swim course. I know how to sight. I know how to draft. I know how to pace myself. I know how to react or respond if somebody kicks me, you know, while I'm swimming. What else am I missing on that
Well,
swimming things?
I mean, I always do talk about like where are we going to start? Where do you want to start,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like,
Yeah.
you know, some athletes want to be in the mix. They want to go out and we have different abilities, swim abilities. So I encourage the athletes to hone in on where do they feel comfortable. And I'm okay with people starting wide if they want. I mean, I guess starting wide doesn't really apply anymore, right? Because it's mostly rolling. I'm still in the
Yeah.
mindset of like mass starts. And if you want to start
Yeah.
wide, you know, that used to be not the best line, right? Because you'd be swimming longer. That was my preferred spot. I swam faster and better if I didn't have a bunch of people around me. But I was kind of like mid-pack swimmer. I always encourage my athletes that might have some swim anxiety, some open water anxiety, to focus on breathing out versus the breathing in, right? That helps calm our nervous system down. A lot of times we start to hyperventilate, right? It's like we're not actually we're not able to get enough oxygen because our lungs are filled with the CO2 we're trying to exhale. So we're actually, if we just take that long breath out, either head down or head up, that will be very helpful to, you know, get past that. Because the swim anxiety really from most people only lasts for like the first two buoys. You know, it's that get to the second buoy, you know, if you need to stop and hang on to a kayaker or whatever and say no, I'm fine, just need a minute, that's fine, right? Like it's, if you get past the second buoy and you'll feel better, and that's always my encouragement. But things like, you know, yeah, where to start, how do you want to feel in the water, do you want to go out hard, do you want to go out easy, do you want to get on feet, right? And having that visualization, and be ready for, you know, what might the unexpected, like getting your goggles kicked off or having to sight into the sun or the rising, you know, sunrise. Yeah, so I'm trying to think of other ones. And then throughout the swim, you know, I try to break it down with athletes on like, you know, the layout. And then coming in, I still encourage a little bit more kicking than normal. I think some athletes still drag their legs a bit, in a wetsuit, especially. It's not necessarily to wake up the legs, but it's just to get your legs kind of moving so that you're going to run walk up in T1. It's kind of a nice, again, mental transition. I think if you're just focusing a little bit on just not crazy kicks, but little flutter kicks
Mm-hmm.
to be ready to run and then and get on the bike. But none of that has anything to do with time, right? It's all
Yeah.
about like how do you want to
Well,
feel?
and I think that like open water swimming is, and whether that's in a triathlon or just open water swim races, I
Hmm.
have a ton of experience at this point with open water swim races, right? Like living here in Hawaii, I do lots of them every year. And you can't even know your time in an
Right.
open water
Until
swim race. You won't know it until the end. You also won't know like who's beating you or who, like that whole thing I talked about before about like who's beating me and who's, I will tell you, like, so if we just back up a little bit, it used to be the case that I would judge my swim race performance by like, I would decide if I had a good swim or not when I ran up the beach and saw who was already there, right? So
right,
if like
right.
there were gals that were already there, you're like, oh, I didn't have a good swim. I thought maybe I had a good swim, but I didn't because she's already here, right? And I noticed how that like was so not serving me, right? Like
Yeah.
it wasn't making swim races any more enjoyable. It wasn't making them better. It wasn't, all it really did was make me feel bad or good about myself, depending on other people. And so one thing that I switched to, so if you're like, if you find yourself in that position, like, here's what I did to switch that was decide for myself in the middle and toward the end of the swim if I was happy with my effort right now. So the question I would ask
Yeah.
myself, and I share this with athletes a lot, is like, right now, am I happy with the effort that I'm
Right.
giving? Right. And so if the answer is yes, right, like I feel
And that's
good,
it.
I feel like I'm moving well. I feel like I'm on the right line. I managed to find a pack that like allowed me to work hard and stay in it. And so like, and if that's the case, then regardless of who's on the beach when you run up there, you had a good swim. And so then all you do is you congratulate her because she did well too, right? And there, and so if the answer is no, like right, like right now, like no, I'm not happy with how I'm doing. That can be because currently in this moment, I have a bad attitude and I'm not really trying that
Hmm.
hard. Then, okay, cool. You still have the whole back half of this to like correct that, right? And turn things
Hmm.
around and make it better for yourself. Or it can be the case, and I've experienced this too, that like my swim fitness is just not high enough to execute this race in a way that feels good to me. Like, I don't like how this
Hmm.
feels. It feels terrible because I don't have enough fitness. Fine.
Hmm.
Then, like, the next step there is go to the pool on Monday and keep swimming more, right?
Yeah,
Like, go back
absolutely.
and train enough so that you have the
Right.
level of fitness that allows you to perform the way that feels good in the moment,
Right.
right? And so
Yeah.
it's kind of like what that question allows me to do is judge myself on how I'm feeling, how hard I'm trying, where my mindset in my head is at, where I'm physically at in the moment. And it has nothing to do with time or place or whatever. And the times of the open water swims, they vary so much depending on current.
Right.
And it is interesting. You hear somebody go like, I mean, we see this in triathlons and open water ocean races and all of it about like what the pace was. And what's interesting, and like look for this in your next race. Either like everybody had a great swim, right? And guess what? Like when everybody had a PR swim, it was either short or there was a tail current. That's why everybody had a great swim, or
Right.
everybody had the worst swim ever. That
Right.
was horrible. Oh my God, it took forever. Yeah, that's because you had a head current, or, like the sun was blinding. Guess what? It
Or
was
yeah.
blinding for everyone, or the buoy was long. The wind blew the buoy away and we all swam longer than we thought. Like whatever it is. So it's like the time in the swim does not matter at all. It
Exactly.
doesn't matter at all, right? Like the pay, like your effort level, how you felt, the line you took, what you were telling yourself, that's what matters
Yeah.
in those swims.
What's so beautiful about open water swimming, it really is one of the few, well, I could think of maybe, well, I don't know, without GPS watches, because you're just out there. Like it's literally about how you feel. And there's not a lot of other experiences where, unless you're not running with a watch or riding with with a GPS watch to give you any of the metrics, where you can really just hone in on how does this feel?
Hmm.
Because so many people will not like, for example, commonly see in Training Peaks uploads, that the feel comes after they look at the data. So then
Yeah.
the run felt bad because it was slow. I'm not going to say that happens all the time, but I can tell it happens with some athletes because it literally is still based around the pace and how long or how long or short it took or whatever. And in trying to get like, well, how did it feel though? Right. It's they often don't remember. Well, it was fine, I guess, but didn't feel good because it was too slow. Anyways, I digress a little bit because it's open water swimming it's one of the few things where we can really hone in on the feel, and sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not so good, and exactly true. Like if it doesn't feel good, why? Can we change the mindset? Sometimes we can't change the conditions. I mean, I think one of my worst open water swims was at Wisconsin, and the lake there, it gets a lot of chop, and I swallowed so much water, every time, and I can breathe both sides. I was pretty good at bilateral breathing, but it was just awful. I mean, I'd swim ocean swims that were way easier than that swim, and everyone's swim was slow. That was my slowest Ironman swim by about 10 to 15 minutes for really no reason other, but everyone's times was slow because the conditions were just crap. So,
Yeah. And
yeah,
I think that's the thing to like keep in mind and remember.
yeah,
I'll share another story of there was a rough water swim I did, I don't know, a decade ago. It was a while ago. And I have a habit, or I don't even know if it's a habit. It's technically a rule. It's a personal rule that I have. I do swim with my Garmin, especially for like,
yeah,
open water races or whatever, but I never look at it.
right,
Like I
right.
don't look
Yeah.
at it while I'm swimming, but I do have it set to like buzz at me every 500, which is
Mm-hmm.
helpful because then it's like sometimes I'll count and it just helps me get a rough idea of like how far in am I, how much longer do I have to go and all this stuff. And like there was a year that the rough waters, it's commonly known to have sometimes there's a
Yeah, pretty.
really strong head current, like really strong head current. Not always, but some years it's really bad. some years the Coast Guard has been out there rescuing like
Yeah.
400 swimmers kind of thing. Cause like they're literally
Yeah.
like not making forward progress. And so, and I knew that course pretty well. But there was a time where like I was swimming and I was alone and I felt like I'd been out there like forever. And, you know, I'm looking at the buildings and the hotels and I know that I'm like, oh, I don't even know if I'm halfway there. You know what I mean? It's like, this is taking forever. I hadn't I hadn't felt my watch like beep at me in a long time, or like it
Yeah.
hadn't buzzed. And so I was like, maybe it went out. And then my head starts going in like all these like, and it's bad. Like when I start thinking about that, like my ideal mindset for an ocean swim is like, I am just focused on my turnover and focused on a strong pull. And ideally I'm on somebody's feet and I'm just staring at the feet and it's just stay there. Right. And then other than that, it's a blank mind. So when I start going off, I start thinking about things like it's a sign that things are not going well. And anyway, so my head started spinning out of control and I just like really wanted to know where I was. And so I made the mistake of looking at my watch, right? I
No.
looked at it and
Yeah.
it was like already nearly an hour. I mean, I want to say it was like 58 or something like that is like
Yeah.
what it said. And I wasn't anywhere near the finish channel. And like from the finish channel, you turn and it's still like 700 meters to the finish. And then, I mean, I cannot tell you the level of negativity that went into my brain when I like looked at my watch. I still can't even see the turn buoy. I'm at 58 minutes already, and I'm like, this, it's solidly like at least another 20 minutes, right? Before I'm going to
Yeah.
finish at this. Like, and I just, oh my God, I was so mean to myself for the whole rest of that swim. And then I like finally made it to the end. You know, I ran across the timing mat and it was just like, sucked so
Yeah.
much. That was terrible, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. And then I go and I check results and Mikki, I
You're
won my
probably at
age
one.
group.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I mean, if you're if if you're feeling this bad, like, and you're a strong swimmer, all these other people behind you are, struggling.
And so it was like that experience was like, I reminded myself so strongly after that experience was that like, okay, Michelle, if you're having a hard time, so is everyone else. And so like and then and again listening to the stories afterward, like the amount of people that got rescued in a boat, right, like didn't even make it. And it's like, I think I went something like 124, 126. I mean, this is like an Ironman distance swim. And it took me almost an hour and a half. And that was the fastest in my age group. So like, that's just telling of what the conditions were that day. And it's like, I could have done the whole thing. I could have made the whole thing more pleasant for myself had I just adopted the mindset of like, oh, okay, today's a tough day. It's tough for everyone. That's good for me. Because if it's hard for me, it's really hard for them, and then I could have just kept my head down. And like, so now that's where I go. And I absolutely will not let myself look at my watch, even if I want to. At this point, it's good. I can't see it anymore.
Right.
I'm too old to have good vision, so I can't even see the numbers. So it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, that it is a really good lesson to know that, like, to just even be aware of like where's your headspace at, and when it's starting to go negative, like really examining that and getting yourself back into a focus zone
Yeah.
is how you're gonna feel better about the
Yeah.
whole thing.
Yeah, I don't think I ever swam with a Garmin watch in an Ironman. I left it on my bike and I just swam completely by feel. And so I don't have strong opinion. If people want to swim with their watch, fine. I mean, you have the data, the race data, right? So I don't really see the purpose. And what I usually encourage people, like, no, always encourage people to do, even if they're going to swim with their watch, or they're going to look at the timing mat, the clock, is to let it go, right? Like, okay, that's done. We're done. And do not take it with you on the bike because it's over. It's over and done. And there's nothing good that can come out of the constant replay in your mind about what you should have done, how you should have swam. That's for next race and or for the debrief, after the race. But yeah, let it go
Yeah,
when you're done. So
that was
yeah.
one of the things that I remember. A lesson that I remember learning as well was so like in the race, we're focused on the process, right? Of like, what am I doing?
Hmm.
And so one thing I used to tell my athletes a lot is like, focus on what you're doing,
Right, not
not
where
on
you're
how you're feeling, right? And it's not a matter of like, that doesn't mean like scan yourself for like, what do I need in this moment, right? Because it can be like, I'm starting to feel like I need some sugar, right? Like that's fine, to think about that. But like I really feel like as soon as you start thinking about and focusing on how uncomfortable it is, like the discomfort level
Hmm.
skyrockets when you start thinking about that versus if you're actually, so if you're on their bike and you're thinking about holding your arrow position and keeping your head in the right place and being in the right gear that allows for the cadence that you're trying to hit in that moment, right? And like making sure that you're fueling and hydrating, on time. Are my shoulders relaxed? Am I relaxing
Hmm.
my jaw? Am I do I feel the pressure from my feet to my pedals? Like those are process things that you can really be focused on instead of like how slow am I going because the wind is coming at me from, like whatever angle, or who just passed me and I'm pissed off because I can't like keep up with it, or whatever.
I absolutely agree. Yeah. I mean, move transitioning, I guess bike is the next thing to talk about what
Yeah, like let's just
processes.
talk about like, yeah, like the things that you can, like if the whole thing is like what does it even mean then to focus on the process on the bike. So you're like the things I just mentioned are all like those are process focused things for the bike. What else?
Right. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, for me, I actually don't have athletes have speed on their watch or Garmin, their bike computers. I think it's completely irrelevant. I have overall time for nutrition fueling. Making sure you're fueling on whatever cadence, 20, 30 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever it is, on the hour for some people, or 45 minutes. Hours a little long, in my opinion.
Totally, I agree.
Yeah, I try to get people that fuel every 20 to 30 minutes pretty consistently. So total time, power, if you have a power meter, heart rate, cadence, if it's something that's helpful, or mileage, if you have like a four, I know some of the Garmin watches now have like 5 or 6 screens, but again, I cannot see when the numbers get small. So assuming you have a bike computer, but I think most of us can feel cadence. It might be helpful to see that number, if you are used to that, or you can kind of tell like when you're slowing your cadence down a bit. So fueling, and for me it's always about, I prefer heart rate over power, and focusing in on whatever your ranges are. And power is, less important because most bike courses are going to have undulating terrain, hills, descents, and so it's more about kind of keeping the heart rate steady, whatever that heart rate is for you, for the athlete. And then you know I know we've talked about in the past, though, some athletes, can see, like, let's say we're having an off day. I'll use my athlete that had a little bit of an off day in terms of, she had a little bit of a GI thing going on before the race. And so maybe, she worked to get hydrated, but her heart rate was very high. And she genetically has high heart rate, so it wasn't like super concerning, but it was even a little bit high for her. What I thought was really wise, and what I encourage people to do, is to just keep that in mind. Like, we don't need to push it up further. And now I should be clear, she also doesn't have a power meter on her race bike, and so she's just riding by heart rate, which I actually think is better, because on this day I would guess maybe her power would have been a little bit lower, and that can freak some people out. But I encourage people, it's just, data points, and honing in on your perceived effort as well. She was also very wise in that, she's like, yeah, I feel like it hasn't been the best lead up. I'm going to focus on fueling and keeping my heart rate kind of steady, letting it come up a little bit on the climbs, recovering a little bit on the descents, and keeping her cadence pretty normal, in her normal ranges. And so it worked out really, really well. I don't know. I'm trying to think of, for the feelings, I totally agree with you on focus on the doing and not what you're feeling. I do often give my athletes the advice, though, if you start to feel really low, sometimes that's an indication your blood sugar is actually not great. And I use the example of teaching in the field. I was teaching field geology, and the young field geologist, I said, or they told me after the field camp was over, like the best advice they got all summer was from me, telling them that when they got sad about the situation, they didn't know what the hell was going on, I said, sit down on an outcrop, a rock outcrop, and have a cookie, right? And let yourself have a few minutes. And oftentimes you'll come around. And it's true, right? Like when we start to feel sad about the situation, or we're too slow, or we're too this, or we're too that, it's actually an indication that we need to take some fueling in. And so
Yeah,
that negativity and that feeling is actually driven by actually something going on inside, right? That we
I
need to
totally
take
agree.
care of.
And I've told athletes the same thing. Like if you start having thoughts like this is stupid. I don't care about this, right? Like that
That's
is a
it.
real, so I mean, that is your brain like trying to protect you because it's like your brain is sensing like, uh-oh, low on
Hmm.
fuel right here, right? So like I have to find a way to
Hmm.
get this human to stop giving so much energy because we're running out. And so if we can convince her that this is stupid and she doesn't have to try so hard, then she'll slow down and ease up and therefore be using less energy. And that's a way to conserve. So like interpreting those thoughts or like being aware of if you're
Hmm.
having that thought, this is
Yeah.
dumb, this is stupid, because inevitably what happens is you then finish the race and at the end, you're like, why didn't I try harder? I should have tried harder. Like I gave up on myself out there. I didn't even try. And you're like, yeah, it's because you were low on fuel and your brain was trying to shut you
Yeah.
down. So when you can recognize those thoughts as I'm low on sugar and like taking some sugar right away and then
Hmm.
see how the thoughts go away. And then you're back on your way and you're moving along and feeling better. So that it really is very good to understand what those thoughts are signaling that like, yeah, that's your central governor trying to slow you down because you're running low on fuel. So you can fix
Right.
that situation.
Right.
Yeah. I think one other thing, a process goal that we haven't mentioned for the bike, I get the fueling every 15, 20 minutes, and I would say very course dependent there, right? Because
Yes.
with some courses, like if you're on a hilly course and
Hmm.
it's like, oh, your 20 minutes comes up, but you're going 35 miles
Oh
an hour
yeah,
down a
definitely.
hill, right? Like that's not a
Yeah.
time to fuel. And
Right.
so if you know a course well enough, you can, and this is how I used to like fueling, especially when I knew a course well at Honu. I would be like, I'm going to fuel at that corner. I'm going to fuel at that turnaround. I'm going to fuel when I get to this hill on the way back, I'm going to sit up. And so picking points along the course, that can be as effective as
Yeah.
like every 15, 20 minutes
Totally.
because you know that like that's a place that, and if you don't fuel there, you're going to miss it because now you're going to enter this hilly section where it's not going to be like conducive to chewing or
Right.
taking your bottle or whatever.
No, it's a good point. And I did go through that with the athletes that were Western Mass had some hills, and we talked about like it's probably better to fuel when you're climbing, except some of the hills we didn't quite know how bad, how steep. I mean, they profiles are often misleading and could be curves, and so yeah, I think that's a really wise thing to consider is like looking at the course ahead of time and where are you going to fuel if you think it might be a problem to, which yeah, descending and fueling not usually a good thing, right? And I always give people like stay focused on where you're at, stay legal,
Mm-hmm.
understand your base, like where you're at fitness wise. How many matches do you probably have? And I try to talk to athletes about like where they're kind of at. And this is not like a hard and fast rule, but if you need to burn some matches to get around people, packs or whatever, like that's what you have to do. Um, but maybe know that like if we're carrying a little bit less fitness than normal, we might have to fall back at some time at some point, right, and not make the pass if we've already burned so many to try to get around packs. And I know, like for example, the athletes that race Western Mass, the swim was canceled because there was sewage in the river. So yeah, or
Lovely.
E. coli or whatever. So they did a rolling bike start, and one of my athletes was like almost dead last, and so the entire bike is like they're just trying to pass people and so maybe not as fun as it could have been because she probably would have come out of the water closer to a in a better position. But that's racing, and we can't always determine how that's going to go, right? If we're gonna have a rolling bike start versus a swim, so be ready for anything. I guess is another mindset, situation before racing. I mean, swims have been getting canceled more and more. As an aside, like, I think to be totally honest, climate change has not been that conducive to a lot of the swim courses and water quality. And, so that's reality and something we have to kind of deal with. But
Mm-hmm.
so looking around too, and then taking the views, obviously, while you're
Yeah.
staying, but appreciate, right? Like, you're out there, this is a choice. And so some of the mindset stuff is like, this is a choice, how hard you want to go, how much, I hate to use the word suffering, but like being comfortable, be in the uncomfortable place. It was a choice to be in the uncomfortable place because you signed up for this race. Going faster and harder does not mean it's going to feel easier, right? If you're fit and you're racing to your potential, you're probably going to have some degree of uncomfortableness. So,
Mm-hmm.
and if you're racing for
Mm-hmm.
fun, then really keep it for fun, like
Yeah.
that's, yeah.
Yeah. I think the mindset thing, like, it's so real that what we focus on is what we experience. And so you can see how this negative spirals out of control if you haven't fueled right. And then your brain is like sensing that you're low on fuel. So your brain's trying to shut you down. So your brain's
Mhm.
like, this sucks. This is hard. Why am I doing this? Da, 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 and then and now your brain is just going to be focused on the negativity and like, this isn't fun at all, versus if you've fueled well and your brain is happy and now you're choosing to focus on like, good job. Like I remember like trying to be my own biggest cheerleader when I
Mhm.
was racing and just telling myself the whole time. And there were times where like on purpose I wouldn't wear a watch so that I could, or at least if I wore a watch, I wouldn't look at it. And that was specifically so that I could like gaslight myself into believing I was doing really well. Right.
Love
So
it.
like whether
Yeah.
I was or I wasn't, because I'm like, I'm going to find out at the end, right? Like whatever the time was. But like in the moment, the best way for me to stay positive, since I had such a hard time letting go of the time and the splits and the like, that was a real process for me to learn how
Hmm.
to let go of that. And a way that I helped myself do it was to literally not look at my watch when I was racing.
Yeah.
So
I
I
know you
just
mentioned
wouldn't
that.
look. And it really like, and so instead I would just be like, great job. And I would think of the things that I did that were good. You ate all of your fuel, right? You drank all of your bottles. You stayed arrow on that downhill that you were afraid of.
Hmm.
You kept your cadence up. Like you kept your shoulders relaxed in that windy section. Like you didn't draft off anybody today. Like you rode totally legal. So like I am saying to myself, like all these things that are positive and like being my own cheerleader in that way. And then at the end, I could look at it and be like, oh, that's what the split was. Huh, I thought it could have gone faster. Well, then that's probably going to track back to training or preparation or something because, like, if I did everything right in the moment that I could have done, then, like, I'm only going to slow myself down by being negative and pissy with myself
Right.
while I'm racing.
Right.
Right. So,
Right.
like, if I could just stay positive, then,
Yeah.
like, I'm going to get the most out of myself, whatever I have on that day. And then if it wasn't enough and I want more, then I'm going to go back and look to my preparation to like see if I can make it better next
I
time.
love that. I mean, that's like just so wise, right? I mean, the process of the race is first thing to be analyzed, right? Or to be looked at objectively. Did you do
Mm-hmm.
everything to set yourself up to finish as hard as you could, as fast as you could? And if you did, then that's an easy, like, yes, I left it all out there today. Versus so many athletes don't objectively look at what they did during their race. Hi. I know, I know.
We're looking at a dog, by the way. Anybody who's
Sorry.
just listening, we've got a dog on screen. A
Yeah,
dog alert.
who wanted some kisses. So, but so many athletes go right to that it's either lack of fitness, which it might be, right? But if
It might be,
but
yeah.
they
But
don't
there's
look at,
nothing you can do about that in the moment. So, like,
no,
guess what? Focusing
it's
on that, like at mile
right.
4 of the run, is not helping you.
Right. And then then I've a lot of times, so I just can't run. Well, so let's just get into the run because that's
Yeah,
usually
yeah,
where, so what's your
yeah.
recommendations for the
Well, so
process?
like if you've done all the other parts right, then like the run part is more likely to go better, right? Like if you fueled yourself well in the morning beforehand, you had a good mindset on the swim, you focus on your process, you paced yourself well on the bike, you ate all the things, you're more likely to, at least in the beginning of the run, feel pretty decent. Like let's say for
Yeah.
the first couple miles of the run, like we would
Yeah.
expect you to feel pretty decent. Likely you're running faster than you feel like you're running. And so it's like you should slow down there, right? And like don't go out too hard. That's the number one mistake I see
Oh yeah.
people
Yeah.
make is, wanting to run faster than their fitness allows. And so the first mile is easy and it's too fast. And then they blow up later. But yeah, so it is a matter of, again, like for me, okay, not looking at splits, not even knowing, making sure that at every aid station I'm taking something. So like this is my advice when we talked earlier about like fueling and like fueling by feel or going with the flow on that. I'm less about that on the bike. I'm like, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I'm getting all
Yeah.
of these calories in. And then on the
Yeah.
run, it's like, all right, let's see how I feel. And my rule, and the rule that I tell athletes to make for themselves is you cannot pass an aid station without taking something. I don't care what you
No, I
take at
like
the aid
that.
station, but take something, right? So whatever sounds good to you. If it's a banana, if it's pretzels, if you can take a gel, great. Gatorade, if Coke sounds good to you, take that ice, stuff it down your bra if it's hot, whatever. And so you're taking everything from the aid station. You're focused on your posture. I'm focused on keeping my head in the right position. I'm focused on relaxing my shoulders and my arms. I'm
Hmm.
focused on relaxing my ankles. I'm smiling and high-fiving little kids, volunteers, waving at my friends, like at least giving the illusion that this is fun, like even if in the moment it isn't. But
Hmm.
The fake it till you make it fun thing can actually work pretty well.
Yeah.
Just like
Yeah.
pretending that you're enjoying it, cheering other people on, telling. And so this comes from like me being a spectator at Honu the last couple of years. Like when athletes are in their own pain cave and they're not like responding to you at all, is they're like they're running by and their head is down and they're just miserable and not happy. Like as a spectator, none of us, we didn't cheer very hard for that person. When people are running by and they're dressed in some like flashy outfit and they're looking at you and like they'll tell you, like I remember I would like at times, like I would see spectators out on a run somewhere as I was racing. I'd be like, cheer for me. And I tell you what, as an athlete, when you ask spectators to cheer for you, they go nuts. They love that. That's what they're there for.
Well,
They want athletes that want to be cheered for. But the athletes that are they're looking miserable, they don't get the cheers. So like if you want to have a more positive experience on the run, interacting with spectators and asking them to cheer
absolutely.
for you, the spectators will go nuts. Like we cheered so hard at Honu a couple weeks ago for like everyone that
Love
ran
it.
by and looked alive, like looked happy, like
Well, and
if
it's
they
peak.
acknowledge us, we acknowledge them. It was just like it was so much fun. We would say fun things to them. We would comment on their outfits. We would offer them a beer, like come back after you finish. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
those kinds of things where it was like, this is fun. So yeah, and it is a matter of just whatever you have to do to keep your mindset happy, keep yourself fueled, keep yourself turning over, keep small goals. Like if it is the point where you're like, I'm breathing really heavy right now, my heart rate's through the roof, I have to slow down and walk, fine, do that. But like set yourself, like what I would do is count steps. Count 20
Mm,
steps and be like, I'm going to run again. Or like pick a landmark to that next tree. Or like, I'm only going to walk at these aid stations just to make sure I get everything in. And then at the end of the aid station, I'm running again. Like pick whatever your rule is for yourself, enforcing that for yourself, reminding yourself that you chose this.
yeah.
Yeah, those are my like
Yeah.
process goals for the run.
Yeah, I agree with those. Interestingly, like the first mile, and I totally agree with people go out way too fast, much faster than they're going to hold the rest of the race. And it does two things. One, it does potentially impact your underlying physiology, taking more energy out than you should be delving out at that moment. It also sets people up for, I think, a mental letdown because they're like, this feels so good and I'm flying. And then all of a sudden, when the next few miles tick off and they're like 30 seconds slower, 20 seconds slower, whatever it might be, there's that decline. And if you're very tied to pace, it's like, oh, I'm struggling, I'm failing, I'm whatever the story is they want to tell themselves. So interesting, the first mile is actually the one time I usually give a pace and it's slow.
And
Like
it's
it's
don't go faster than this.
don't
Like
go
no
faster.
faster
Like
than
I
this. Yeah.
want this to
Yeah.
be 10-minute mile, right? Like it is, I usually take about 30 to 45 seconds above what I think their average pace is going to be. And that might mean a 12-minute mile, right? Like
Mhm.
I don't care if you're walking out of transition. I mean, I would rather you walk out of transition and you're taking some fluids and you're taking a gel and you're high-fiving the kids and you're enjoying coming out of transition and you're letting the bike go. Just like you let the
Mhm.
swim go, you let the bike go. And most I would say it's really hard to do that. It's really hard to go that slow out of transition because everyone's cheering but the athletes that can do that, I guarantee are setting themselves up better to run faster the rest of well, certainly to run faster. The next mile is going to be faster, probably the third, fourth, fifth. You're going to work into your efforts. And I've also seen the opposite true. Sometimes we don't feel good coming out of transition. We feel quite crappy. And so actually one of the athletes who wasn't carrying as much fitness as she would normally be carrying into a 70.3 last weekend, she basically said she didn't feel good until mile 5, right? So there's also that component of don't judge things early on,
Yes.
right? Like you might feel
Even at all, like the whole time.
right,
Like I've told athletes, like we are going to like judge this race performance. We're just going to do
right,
that later. Like
later,
on Monday or Tuesday is when we're going to objectively judge this
right,
performance on like how it went as compared to how we thought it was going to go on your fitness and blah blah. Judging your performance at mile 6 and
right.
deciding all the things that you need to change about your training and blah 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 is not productive in that moment. in
Right.
that moment, it's like, what am I going to take from this next aid station? Right.
Right.
Like that's what we focus on. But like the postponing, it's not that we don't judge it. We're just going to postpone the
Yes.
judgment of this until later.
Right.
That's when we'll judge it. But judging
Right.
yourself in the middle of that run is never productive.
Right.
You'll never go faster if you are judging yourself in the
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah, I totally agree. Even not judging, remain as objective in the moment. Just focus again on the doing, the process, the form, how you're feeling. For me on the run, I do recommend if people can. So what worked always very well for me was one shot block a mile. And if people are more on the gel end of things, then I say, you've got to take in, I prefer like a half a gel every, what it would be well, it depends on the gel because there's so many different types now and different carbs. And, we try to break it down so that they're not taking in a full gel unless we know their stomach is rock solid. Taking in a full gel with a high heart rate, a race heart rate, usually I try to get them to break it up and kind of delve it out more slowly. And the reason Michelle and I talk about this a lot is one, from experience from ourselves and other athletes, but the other thing is like and why you should be really focused on fueling on the bike is because it's easier to digest on the bike. When you get to the run, mechanically, your guts are jostling. Typically, people have a little bit higher heart rate, just given the differences in muscular action, right? Like how many muscles are working on the bike versus the run. Typically, people have higher heart rate on the run if you fueled well on the bike. If you have not fueled well on the bike, usually you'll see a decrease in heart rate because you're literally running out of steam and running out of your energy budget is below what you're capable of sustaining. But yeah, so really focusing on fueling on the bike, and then on the run, trying, less. You typically people can take in a little bit less, and you need to delve it out in smaller increments for just the GI upsets. I tended to go with one shot block a mile, which usually corresponded to aid stations, taking in a little hydration. Or now I know Ironman has also gone to this mortal hydration, which I know does not work for many people. And so getting used to carrying a belt, carrying a backpack, both my athletes had handhelds of what they normally drink, which is Scratch or Morton or with Osmo, whatever they're training with, which is not mortal hydration. They're carrying it with them for the run. That's a safer option. And I know, I've heard people say, "Oh, I don't like it. I don't like it." I'll go back to what Lucho said.
Fueling correctly is a choice.
It's a choice. So I don't care if you don't like it. Like this works for you. If you want to,
Which part do you not like more?
yeah,
Bunking on the run or
or
carrying a
carrying a
bottle?
bottle. Like I don't
It's like
understand.
that's your choice.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then I have athletes focus on heart rate. And if they have pace on the watch, I leave it up to them. I've done most of my races. I never had pace. I never had like mile laps. I had heart rate and total time and total distance yeah, I mean, bike that I later had power, but for the run, it's always been heart rate, total time, total
Hmm.
distance. I mean, you know where you're at, right? Like there's aid stations. It's not like you need lap miles and beeping at you and telling you your paces. And so focusing on heart rate, keeping it very steady. We always talk about ranges and what happens, if you're running high or if you're running low, it's likely nutrition. The athlete that I had a little bit of GI upset before the race, again, her heart rate was very high coming out of transition. She ran with about that high heart rate till about mile 5, and coupled with her perceived effort, she made the choice wisely to pull it back a little bit. And I think that was very wise because it's not like she was bonking low, like her heart rate was really dropping off, but she was like, this is hard. This is too hard
Hmm.
to maintain. And I've had these, GI and, whatever. So it's like using the data and the metrics along with how you're feeling, your perceived effort, and what your situation is, like how much fitness you're carrying. Did you have a stomach bug beforehand? All these things. So yeah, and then of course the running cues that I love are uh, pick up your feet depending on the type of race. I do coach some ultra runners, and so picking up your feet is almost more important than anything else because when we get tired, we start to drag our
Yeah.
feet and we trip. But that can also, with a lot of the Ironman run courses now in 70.3, they're having people run concrete sidewalks, step up, step down onto the cement around the block. They're crazy. They used to just be like on a open road, right, which is ideal. And so now it is like there's more risks of not, if you're not picking up your feet, then you're tripping over something. And so I don't focus on run cadence. I encourage people to stand tall, just like you said, relax shoulders. Fast feet is something that I always said to myself. because fast feet doesn't, it's maybe a little bit higher cadence, and it's just a mindset, right, of ease. And I like the cue that Lawrence gives of turning the world underneath you. Like, do you remember that one? It's like the earth, you're not moving forward, right? You're turning
You
the earth.
push the earth away
You're
from you.
Yeah, and I use that, not in my when I was not I didn't use that when I was racing, but I've used that a lot on my training runs, and it's been really
Hmm.
helpful. And the athletes I've given that advice to for their runs, it's been very helpful. And I do think it
Hmm.
changes our run form to be a little bit more relaxed. And it's a mindset thing too. We're embracing where we're at right now. We're not thinking about next mile or the finish line, anything else down the road. We're thinking about what we can do, you know, the cliche saying, run the mile you're in, which so many people are already projecting. Well, if I'm running this pace, then I'm going to be at the finish line at this time. Like, you could speed up. Like my athlete that did speed up, like she felt better after mile 5 or 6 because she fueled and she went out at an effort that felt very, we actually talked about starting around like math. Usually that's kind of like upper zone two, because we felt like with her level of fitness, it might not be maintainable to push much above that effort. And once she got into the run and she fueled well, then she was able to work into those efforts, and felt decently good to do so. And now, of course, recovery played a role, and good recovery and tapering, and then good nutrition. But yeah, what was I going to say? I had one other comment. Really, I'll just say one more thing about the fueling and knowing whether or not you're giving everything you can in the moment. It's hard to assess that sometimes in the race. Well, it's not hard in the
Mm.
race. Yeah, maybe it is, because if you don't know, if you're not pushing, right? Like if you ask yourself in the moment, am I going as hard as I can? If you have not fueled well, that question might be, yes, I am, because you're bonking, right? So that's why it's a little hard to deconstruct that. If you, let's just say you finish the race and you feel like you gave it all, right? Like you gave it everything you got, but you're not willing to look back to write down what you ate, how many carbs you took in, what electrolytes you were. You might feel pretty crappy. I've often seen when athletes get into a bad situation with fueling after a race, they often feel nauseous afterwards,
Mm.
struggle
Hmm.
to eat, right? Like that's often a blood
Hmm.
sugar, just, like I don't know the whole process, but that's very
I think
common.
there's some dehydration involved in that.
Dehydration.
That's just because I
Yeah,
get like I sweat a lot. Hydration
right,
is hard to keep up with here in Hawaii.
right.
I notice that nausea is a symptom of when I've not been able to keep up with the sweat
Right.
rate like
Yeah,
needs for
yeah,
hydration. The
yeah,
nausea is an outcome of that.
yeah.
And I think it goes with feeling too. So like if you're taking in concentrated carbohydrates and not enough hydration to offset that, then nausea can, and that's why people be like, I can't eat anymore. And you're like, well, it might be because you're not hydrated enough. And if you were to hydrate more, then
You
your
could,
body can
yes.
absorb your carbohydrates better because there
Yeah,
is an element of
yeah,
hydration involved in absorbing carbohydrates.
right.
So
But
nausea can come from that too.
yeah, but so yeah, if you feel like you gave it all, right, and like you left it all out there on the race course, however, you recovered in 2 to 3 days, feeling like I'm good, I'm good to go. There's no muscle soreness. There's no, like, I'm not tired. I'm not fatigued. That's a fueling issue. You were actually not able to push your body to the limits on race day. Unless you're maybe like, I can't even think, like, even if you're in your 20s and you're like a full-time pro and you get massages all the time, like if you leave it all out there on the race course and you push hard to the limits of your abilities, you will be maybe, sore, tired, fatigued, like exhausted, right? Because it's supposed to be that effort, especially for 70.3 and Ironman. So for example, an athlete that I work with, is fairly, I usually, after a fairly hard effort, I will pull back the run for about a week after
Same.
70.3. And after an Ironman, it's actually 2 weeks, because even if you're running as easy as possible, and a lot of athletes actually can't run as easy as possible, running is actually still pretty hard on the body. And so for true recovery, it should be bikes and swims. In my opinion, swimming as much as possible. I know we've talked about there's some athletes that are actually not efficient in the water, so it might not be the best option. So therefore, it's a bike. But if you're recovered to feel good enough to run hard, like really run really hard 3 to 4 days after your A race, yeah, that's nutrition. You
Yeah.
absolutely did not race to your potential. I'm sorry. I'll probably die on that hill. So doing again, like Michelle said, like the objective assessment after the race, judging the race after the race, and what went well and what didn't go well, so that you can improve. And maybe your training does need to be tweaked, right? But again, a lot of athletes that are focused on the outcomes miss the process because they're so
Hmm.
focused on the endpoint of, I want to finish in X time, I want to run this pace, and so they actually are obsessed, almost like they've got blinders on in that regard, and are not focusing on what they can do to take care of themselves in the moment, which is
Yeah. It's
fueling
like the
form.
chances of
Yeah.
making a mistake, if you're only
Huge.
focused
Yeah.
on like what's happening at the finish line, the chances of you making a mistake with pacing or, with your
Yeah.
fueling or whatever
Yeah.
are just so much higher
Yeah.
than if you're focused. Because so while we should probably wrap this up,
Yeah.
but like as we've really focused primarily on the process of what it looks like when we're racing. But just to make this point that we can focus on process is literally an everyday
It
thing,
is.
right? So like
Yeah.
the focus on the process of going to bed on time so that I can get a full night's sleep, so I can wake up tomorrow morning and feeling like somewhat refreshed and recovered in a way that's going to allow me to do whatever type of workout I had on tap that day, and then thinking ahead to fuel myself appropriately and at the right time for whatever workout I'm planning on doing that day. And then even in the process of the workout, making sure that I'm pacing my warm up properly and that I'm going easy on the easy parts and then faster on the fast parts, but really focusing on the feeling of it and playing. And that's where, like in training, you can really play around with the process more, and you can start to learn because it's so low stakes, right? Like it doesn't really matter if you screw it up. So you can say, what if I focus on, my cadence? Does that change anything? And you're like, actually, no, like that for me, like that wasn't the thing. Okay. What if I focus on, this another thing of like when I'm moving, you know what, that actually worked. If I focus on my head position, okay,
Hmm.
yeah, no, I felt like my alignment was a lot better and then I was faster. So thinking about even in training, what types of things you can, like what kind of process goals you can focus on with your training. And then like, because maybe just this last point, all of this is practice, and practice is practice. And so if you find yourself, if you're like I was, and very focused on outcome and very focused on other people and very focused on that time or the place or whatever, to the point where you can't even really, what does it even look like to focus on process? Know that it is a practice. And so
Hmm.
you use your training as practice, focusing on the process. So I'm going to focus on, and the more you practice it, the easier all the stuff that Mikki and I talked about as far as like race process. If you're focused on that in training, it will be very natural for you to do come race day,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Totally agree.
Versus if in training you're only focused on the pace, you're only focused on,
Speed or
I don't know.
power or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, and overall, like, yeah, if you struggle in the training to do these things, then it's probably too big of a stretch to think that you can just apply it to race day, because yeah, everything's muscle, our brains are, it's all muscle memory. It's all what we can, fall back to, so that we're not having to make these big stretches or big decisions or big, on race day, when really we want to kind of set it and forget it, and set it and go, right? Like, and you're kind of almost on autopilot. That's how I felt racing. I was like on autopilot, and did not look at, I didn't look around. I never wanted to know where I was at, didn't care for the most part. I was focused on how I felt and if I was going hard enough. And, if that was it, that's it. That's all I cared, like I want to leave it all out there every time. And
Not all of
some,
us are that gifted. Some of us take like 20 years to learn what Mikki just said, but eventually you can get there. So
you
if you're
can,
not there
everyone
right
can get
now,
there.
like
Yeah.
have hope, because like I didn't used to be there and now
Yeah.
I'm very happily there. And I'll tell you, like everything about training and racing gets better for me.
Hmm.
Like for me, it's all gotten better since I've really focused on the
Yeah.
process part. And it's like,
Yeah.
I was telling Mikki before we even started this podcast recording that in focusing on the process in training, right now, like I'm enjoying that so much that, like this weekend is our local swim races start, and I'm confident that I will swim as well as I'm capable of swimming, and whatever that is, it is, and whatever that is, I will be back in the pool on Monday, back to
Right.
training. right?
Right.
And like tweaking my process a little, like I'll see if I can learn anything like from that, like where
Hmm.
were my weaknesses? And you go, okay, so like that's something I have to work on. And then I have a couple weeks to work on it before the next race.
Yeah. I mean, it's so to get into that place, right? Where it's, you might not be swimming as fast as you used to swim, right? 20 years ago, whatever,
I'm not, but I'm swimming as fast as I'm capable of swimming right now.
right now. And that's all that matters. That's literally all that matters. The past does not matter. The future, I mean, it's now. And, the future matters only so much as like, are we moving in a direction that we feel is aligned with our values and who we are and who we want to be? And, is exciting, right? Like, is you're passionate about pushing yourself to become better in the future, right? Maybe not forever, right? When you're 90, you're probably not going to be swimming as fast as you are right now. Hopefully
I
you'll still be
definitely won't be.
swimming.
I think
you
that's
know
one of the things is that you look back and you're like, oh man, like at times when you think like, oh, I'm not swimming as fast as I want to be. But like, guess what? 10 years from now, I'm going to look back on this time and be like, and I'm going to be really proud of like the swimmer that I
Mhm.
was at 51, right? Because at 61, while I might still be a decent swimmer, I'm not going to be as fast as I was at 51. So, and even at 51, I'm not as fast as I was at 41. And it just is what it is. And like, okay, I can accept it, but I can be the fastest swimmer that I can be at 51 and then the fastest I can be at 61. But to beat
Yeah.
myself up now because I'm not where I was
Right.
10 years ago, it's just a giant mistake that only results in being
Yeah.
dissatisfied in the moment.
Yeah.
That's the only
Do
thing
you
it
know?
results in.
Yeah. Do you know the coach Matt Fitzgerald? No, I really will
Yeah.
lead. So
Yeah.
do you follow him on Substack?
I used to, but it's been a minute. And I guess not on Substack. I've read a lot of his books and I know his
Yeah.
story. Like I know
Right.
his long COVID
Yeah.
story. But
Yeah.
and I know he was trying to do some things that I'm not sure I would have tried to do, but like I haven't followed it along
I
closely
have
his
to
journey.
say, I haven't followed closely, but I did read he posted, he just recently did a half marathon. And yeah, he's had long COVID for a while and pretty bad long COVID, even though apparently COVID didn't exist, right? And we're getting rid of all the people that advise us on vaccines. Whatever he may have had, I believe he had that COVID does exist, and he has long COVID. Anyways, he just did a half, and his Substack was really enlightening and really wise and powerful in terms of exactly what we're talking about here. Like, it's not his fastest half marathon ever, but he feels more proud of the one today after what he's gone through, and how not only that, but how he's training and how he's observing, how he is executing, and nothing is based around time goals, right? Like, and he's probably, I don't know what his fastest, I think he did state in the Substack what his PR was, right? And it's probably 10 minutes off of that, right? But now he's mid 50s, I think, or upper 40s, I can't remember. Quite a bit older than where when he ran his PR, and he's had long COVID. So yeah, I mean, accepting where we're at right now at whatever stage of life, whatever has happened to us, maybe an illness or lack of fitness for whatever reasons, we can still feel really proud of the effort we're putting in if we focus on the process, and we can still empty the tank if we're smart about staying in the process and fueling and mindset. And I will share my athlete that it's her first race back in a while. And she said, oh, I think the run's going to be a slog. And I was like, let's stop right there. Right. Like, we don't even want to we don't want to think about what it could feel like, because if we have that in our mind, that's going to be a slog, right? Because I'm not carrying a lot of fitness. If we have that in our mind, it does foreshadow. Like, we can get into that negative, not, negative thought process, instead of like, let's just see how it feels. Let's just focus on fueling, see how it feels, get into your groove. And immediately, yeah, and she's a smart, very smart woman. So I know she would have rectified this because she's a problem solver. But if she had come on a transition and I think she was not feeling very good, right? If she had had that mindset stuck right in her brain that, oh, this is gonna be a slog, maybe it would have overshadowed, all the way through the run, and maybe she would have just stayed steady. I have no worry that she wouldn't have finished, but like, she ended up finishing strong and negative splitting by quite a bit, because I think she just allowed it to come as it happened while staying present. And so I think that's
Yeah.
really the key. So
I think
yeah.
a mindset that helps me a lot going into a race or anything that's going to be hard is like acknowledging the honest truth that it's
Hmm.
going to be hard
Yeah.
and I am capable of meeting this challenge.
Yes.
right? So that way, when you're in it and it is hard, you're not surprised, right? If you tell yourself, this is going to be easy, I'm going to
Right.
get like, no, it's never going to be easy. When you're racing, it's not easy. It might feel good. Like you might get to a point where like the hard push felt good to you, right? Because you're on a roll
Hmm.
and you're chugging along, and like there is a degree of like that can feel good, but it's still uncomfortable. But I find that like if I remind myself how hard this is going to be. It's going to be hard, and I'm up for the challenge. I'm capable of doing it. Like I can meet this moment, and I can manage the discomfort when it comes. Then it's like that's very real to me, and that is better than gaslighting and saying it's going to be easy, or thinking that it's going to be so hard that and I'm not ready for it. Right? If it's hard and I'm not ready for it, then the chances of me collapsing and caving are very high. If I think it's going to be easy and then it's hard, I'm super surprised, and then it's like it's not going to plan. But if I'm like it's going to be hard and I can do this, then you're like when it's hard, you're like, yeah, I can do this. So like that's a good feeling too.
Absolutely.
And then there's a lot
Yeah.
of pride at the finish line, right? That it's like, yeah, okay, it was hard and I did it.
Yeah, I agree completely.
All right, let's leave it
Okay.
there.
Yeah. Well, it was good to talk to you, Michelle, and I look forward to the next one as always.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Okay. Take care.
Bye.